I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers brushing the edge of a small canvas propped against the salt shaker. It was one of Henry's paintings. A cluster of sunflowers, their petals bold and yellow against a sky he'd mixed with too much hope. He'd painted it the summer we moved into this house. Back when the garden out front was just a patch of dirt we promised to tame together. That was 30 years ago. Now the garden bloomed without him. And the house felt like a museum of moments I couldn't touch anymore. The silence was the worst part. No creak of Henry's chair in the studio upstairs. No hum of him cleaning his brushes. He'd been gone 4 years. Taken by a heart attack so sudden it felt like the world had misplaced him. I'd walk past his easel sometimes, half expecting to see him there, squinting at a canvas. But it was just me now. And the quiet had a way of settling into my bones. Even the sparrows outside seemed to chirp softer, like they knew I was listening alone. I used to fill the days teaching art at the high school, showing kids how to blend colors and trust their hands. But retirement stripped away the noise of chalkboards and laughter, leaving me with too much time to notice what was missing. My daughter, Emily, was the biggest absence. She was 35 now, a designer with a sharp eye for sleek furniture in city apartments. She'd moved away years ago, chasing a life that didn't seem to have room for me. I'd send her things, a box of watercolors for Lily, her 8-year-old daughter, or a scarf I'd knitted for Christmas. They'd vanish into silence. No call, no note, just the faint hope that maybe they'd use them. Last month, I'd packed a set of paintbrushes for Lily, wrapping them in tissue paper like they were something precious. I pictured her opening them, her small hands smudging color across a page. But weeks passed, and nothing came back, not even a text. I told myself she was busy, that Emily's life was a whirlwind of deadlines and meetings. But deep down, I knew better. Some silences aren't accidental. Then, 3 days ago, an email landed in my inbox. It was from Emily, short and careful, like she'd measured every word. Mom, things are hectic here. Tom's working late, and Lily's after-school stuff is a lot to juggle. If you're up for a change, maybe you could stay with us for a bit. Help with Lily, keep things steady. I read it again and again, my coffee going cold. It wasn't a warm invitation, not the kind you frame and keep. But it was something, a crack in the door, a chance to step back into her world. My heart did a little leap, the kind that feels foolish but unstoppable. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the sunflowers nodding in the breeze. Henry used to say they turned their faces to the light no matter what. Maybe I could do that too. Maybe this was my chance to paint something new. To be a mother again. A grandmother who mattered. That night, I made up my mind. I'd go to Emily's. I'd leave this house behind and chase the light she'd offered. However faint it seemed, the decision came faster than I expected. Like a brushstroke you don't plan but can't undo. I called a real estate agent the next morning. A young man with a clipboard who walked through my house jotting notes. "This place has good bones," he said, peering at the garden where the sunflowers stood tall. "But the market's slow. Are you sure you want to sell?" I nodded, my throat tight. Henry left me this house. But he's gone. I need to be with the ones who are still here. I checked my accounts. The sale would bring close to $400,000. Enough to carry me for years. But it wasn't about the money. It was about not waking up to an empty kitchen. Not watching the sunflowers turn their faces to a light I couldn't feel. When I packed, I lifted Henry's small sunflower painting from the table, wrapping it in soft linen like it was a piece of my heart. I opened the back door and stepped into the garden. The air sharp with autumn. The sunflowers were past their prime. But one dried stalk caught my eye. Its petals brittle but stubborn. I clipped it, tucked it into a plastic bag, and slipped it into my suitcase. "You're coming with me," I whispered, as if Henry could hear. The day I left, I stood on the porch, looking back at the house. It felt like closing a sketchbook I'd filled with 30 years of colors. I didn't cry, just pulled the door shut and turned away. The city greeted me with a gray haze, the kind that smells of asphalt and hurry. Emily's text came as I landed. Meeting ran late. "Mom, take a cab. Code's 4729 for the door." No one was waiting at the airport. I sat in the taxi, watching the skyline blur past. My suitcase rattling in the trunk. It reminded me of dropping Emily off at college, waving through a bus window as she rolled into a life I wasn't part of. She'd been my boldest sketch, my brightest creation, but somewhere along the way, her lines had grown sharp, distant. The cab pulled up to a sleek apartment building, all glass and steel. I punched in the code. The door buzzing opened to a hallway that smelled of fresh paint and disinfectant. Emily's unit was on the 5th floor, but no one answered when I knocked. I let myself in, the air cool and unfamiliar. The living room was a mix of modern furniture and chaos, Lily's crayons scattered on the coffee table. A stack of unwashed plates in the sink. A note on the counter read, "Mom, your room's by the stairwell. We're out till dinner." I followed the note to a small room near the emergency exit. Barely bigger than a closet. The walls were scuffed, the air heavy with the faint tang of mildew. A single bed sat against one wall. A folding chair in the corner. I set my suitcase down and unwrapped Henry's painting, propping it on the chair. It looked out of place. Too warm for this gray space. I pulled out the dried sunflower stalk and set it beside the canvas. "We made it," I said softly, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. The room felt like a borrowed corner of someone else's life. But I told myself it was temporary. This was my chance to start again. To be needed. I just had to wait for the light to find me. The first morning in Emily's apartment, I woke to the hum of traffic outside and a faint ache in my back. The bed was too narrow, the mattress thin, and the room's damp air clung to my skin. I sat up, glancing at Henry's sunflower painting on the folding chair. Its colors seemed muted in the dim light filtering through a small, smudged window. I reached for the dried sunflower stalk beside it, its brittle petals crumbling slightly under my touch. "We'll make this work," I whispered, though my voice sounded less certain than I wanted. I shuffled to the kitchen, hoping to find coffee or at least a familiar face. The apartment was quiet, the dishes from last night still piled in the sink. A sticky note on the fridge read, "Mom, help yourself to cereal. Lily's at school. We're at work." I poured a bowl but didn't eat, my appetite lost in the stillness. Instead, I started cleaning, scrubbing plates, wiping counters, anything to feel useful. By noon, I'd swept the floor and folded a basket of Lily's clothes, her tiny socks bright against the gray of the apartment. When Lily came home, her backpack slung low, I felt a spark of hope. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level, "want to paint with me? I brought some brushes." Her eyes lit up, but only for a moment. "Can you get me the fancy watercolor set? The one with glitter? My friend Ava has it." I smiled, brushing her hair back. "Maybe we can use what we have first. Make something special." She frowned, crossing her arms. "Yours are boring. I want the good ones." Before I could answer, she ran to her room, the door clicking shut. Emily and Tom got home late, their voices sharp with the day's stress. I'd made dinner, roasted vegetables and chicken, the kind Henry used to love. Emily barely looked at the table. "Thanks, Mom, but we already grabbed takeout," she said, kicking off her heels. Tom gave a quick nod, his eyes on his phone. I sat alone with my plate, the food cooling as their laughter drifted from the living room. It was like I was a shadow, useful only when they needed something cleaned or cooked. I tried to fit into their rhythm. Mornings, I'd walk Lily to the bus stop, her chatter about school filling the silence. Afternoons, I'd sketch in my room, the sunflower painting watching me like an old friend. I even hung it on the wall, though the nail left a small crack in the plaster. "You brighten this place," I told it, but the room still felt like a borrowed corner. I kept hoping Emily would notice, maybe ask about the painting, or Henry, or me, but she didn't. Her days were a blur of client calls and fabric swatches, and I was just another item on her checklist. One evening, after 2 weeks of tiptoeing around their lives, I found Lily struggling with a drawing. "Can I help?" I asked, sitting beside her. We spent an hour blending colors, her giggles warming the room. For a moment, it felt like family, but when Emily walked in, her face tightened. "Mom, don't let her get paint on the table. This is a rental." I apologized, wiping the table clean. But the warmth faded. Lily went to bed, and I retreated to my room, the ache in my chest heavier than ever. The next night, we sat around the dinner table, me, Emily, Tom, and Lily. I'd made pasta, hoping for a real meal together. The conversation was stilted, mostly about Tom's work at the bank. Then Emily set down her fork, her voice casual but pointed. Mom, we've been talking. Rent's steep here, and with Lily's art classes and all, it's tight. If you're staying long-term, maybe you could chip in. You know, no rent, no stay. The words landed like a slap. Lily looked up, confused, but didn't say anything. Tom kept eating, his fork scraping the plate. I stared at my hands. The ones that had painted classrooms full of dreams. The ones that had held Emily when she was small. I didn't come here to be a tenant, I said quietly, but Emily just shrugged. We're all adults, Mom. It's how things work. I nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say. I cleared the dishes, the clink of plates louder than my thoughts. Back in my room, I sat on the bed, the sunflower painting staring back at me. Its colors felt like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep anymore. I'd come here for family, for Lily's laughter, for Emily's smile, but all I felt was the weight of being needed only for what I could give. The dried sunflower stalk sat in its jar, crumbling a little more each day. I wondered if I was crumbling too. That night, after Emily's words, no rent, no stay, hung in the air like a bad smell, I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the crack in the ceiling. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in with the weight of being unwanted. Henry's sunflower painting sat on the chair, its colors dull in the half-light. I reached for the dried sunflower stalk in its jar, my fingers tracing the brittle edges. I'd come here to be a mother, a grandmother, but I felt like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Something in me snapped, quiet but final. I couldn't keep painting over the truth with hope. The next morning, I packed my suitcase before the apartment woke up. I moved carefully, folding my clothes, tucking the painting into its linen wrap. The sunflower stalk went into a small box, its petals shedding like old promises. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Emily, I'm going to stay with a friend for a while. I'll call soon. No explanations, no apologies. I stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind me, and called a cab. As the city blurred past, I felt lighter, like I'd left a heavy sketch behind. Margaret's house was on the edge of town, a cozy bungalow with ivy climbing the walls and a porch lined with potted herbs. She'd been my friend since our teaching days, a gallery owner now, with a laugh that could fill a room. When I knocked, she opened the door, her silver hair pulled back, paint smudges on her apron. Clara, get in here, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of turpentine and lavender. No questions, just warmth. I hadn't realized how much I needed it until my shoulders relaxed. Her home was a burst of color, canvases stacked against walls, jazz humming from a record player, sunlight spilling through wide windows. She led me to a guest room with a quilted bed and a view of her backyard garden. This is yours as long as you need, she said, handing me a mug of chamomile tea. I set the sunflower painting on the nightstand, its colors brighter here, and placed the dried stalk in a small glass vase. You made it, I whispered to it, feeling a flicker of something like hope. Over dinner, warm soup and crusty bread, Margaret listened as I spilled the story of Emily's apartment. The cold dinners, the rent demand. Her eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. You've always given too much, she said finally, her voice gentle but firm. It's time you painted something for yourself. Her words stuck with me, like a brushstroke I hadn't considered. The next day, she dragged me to her gallery, a small space filled with local artists' work. There's a community art class tomorrow, she said. Come teach with me. You're too good to hide in that room. I hesitated, but the class pulled me in. It was a mix of retirees and young dreamers, their hands messy with charcoal and acrylics. I showed them how to layer colors, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. A woman with gray curls thanked me, her eyes crinkling. You make this feel like home, she said. I smiled, my chest loosening. That evening, I sat in Margaret's garden, sketching the herbs under the fading light. The sunflower stalk sat beside me, its jar catching the glow of a lantern. I thought of Lily, her giggle when we painted together. But I pushed the ache away. I wasn't ready to go back. Margaret joined me, a glass of wine in hand. "You're not running away," she said, reading my silence. "You're choosing yourself. That's not the same thing." I nodded, the truth settling in. For the first time, I felt like I was standing on my own canvas, not someone else's. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and I wondered if Emily even noticed I was gone. But here, with Margaret's music drifting through the air and a sketchbook in my lap, I wasn't crumbling anymore. I was starting to grow. A week into staying at Margaret's, I realized I'd left my old watercolor set at Emily's apartment, tucked in a drawer by the bed. It wasn't just any set. Henry had given it to me when we were newlyweds. Its wooden case worn smooth from years of use. I needed it for the community art class. So I called a cab and headed back. The city felt sharper now, its edges less forgiving. I told myself I'd be quick, grab the paints, leave a note for Lily, maybe slip out before anyone noticed. The apartment building loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting a cloudy sky. I punched in the code, the door buzzing open like it had a grudge. The hallway smelled the same, paint and stale air. I eased into Emily's unit, expecting silence, but voices drifted from the kitchen. Emily and Tom, their tones low but tense. Something made me pause at the top of the stairwell, my hand frozen on the railing. I don't know why I didn't call out. Maybe it was the way the air felt, heavy with secrets. "She's got to have money from selling that house," Tom was saying, his voice clipped. "We can't keep renting forever. The landlord's ready to sell this place, but we need a bigger down payment." Emily sighed, sharp and frustrated. I tried. "Tom, I told her to chip in for rent, but she just left. Now what? We can't ask her outright." My heart thudded, loud enough I thought they'd hear it. I pressed myself against the wall, the watercolor set forgotten. Tom's voice dropped lower. "What about that painting in the storage closet? The big one, with the sunflowers?" I looked it up. Henry's work sells for thousands now. We could get at least 20 grand for it. "She doesn't even know it's there." Emily hesitated, then said, "It's just sitting in the dark. She's got that little one in her room. She won't miss it." The words cut deeper than anything she'd said before. That painting, the large sunflower canvas Henry poured his heart into, the one we'd hung in our living room for decades, wasn't just art. It was him, us, everything we'd built, and they were planning to sell it like it was junk from a garage sale. I backed away, my legs unsteady, and slipped out before they heard me. The cab ride to Margaret's was a blur, my hands shaking as I clutched my empty bag. I'd forgotten the watercolors, but it didn't matter. All I could see was that painting, its golden petals hidden in a closet, reduced to a dollar sign. When I stepped into Margaret's house, she was arranging frames in the living room. One look at my face, and she dropped everything. "Clara, what happened?" she asked, guiding me to the couch. I told her everything, the rent, the down payment, the painting. My voice broke when I got to Henry's canvas. "They didn't invite me to be family," I said, the truth spilling out like paint from a tipped jar. "They wanted my money, and now they're ready to sell the one piece of him I have left." Margaret's eyes flashed, but her voice stayed steady. "They don't get to decide what's yours. Not your money, not your memories." She handed me a glass of water, her hand lingering on mine. "You're not helpless. Clara, what do you want to do?" I stared at the sunflower stalk on the coffee table, its jar catching the light. It was crumbling, but it was still there, still holding its shape. Like me, I'd come to Emily's thinking I could fix us. But I'd been painting a picture that didn't exist. They didn't see me as a mother or a widow with a heart full of colors. They saw a bank account, a means to an end. But I wasn't their tool. I had savings, a life, a voice, and I had Henry's painting. Whether they knew it or not, I'm going to take it back, I said, my voice quiet but sure. "All of it." Margaret nodded, a spark in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground beneath me shift, not crumbling, but steadying. The morning after I overheard Emily and Tom, I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, a cup of tea untouched in my hands. The sunflower stalk in its glass vase caught the sunlight. Its brittle form somehow stronger than I'd remembered. Their words echoed in my head, she's got to have money. We could sell that painting, each one a brushstroke painting a truth I couldn't ignore. They hadn't wanted me, they'd wanted what I could give. But I wasn't a blank canvas for their plans. I had my own colors, my own lines to draw. I called a real estate agent that afternoon. A brisk woman named Linda who'd sold Margaret's gallery years ago. The building Emily's renting in. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Is it still on the market? Linda confirmed it was. Listed quietly by owners eager to retire. They want a quick sale. She said, cash offers get priority. I didn't hesitate. I'll pay cash. The words felt bold, like a stroke of paint I couldn't take back. My savings from the house sale were enough. And this wasn't about revenge. It was about claiming what was mine, my dignity, my memories, Henry's legacy. Linda moved fast. Within days, the paperwork was ready. I asked her to arrange a walkthrough, but not to tell Emily or Tom who the buyer was. I wanted to see their faces when the truth landed. Margaret insisted on coming. You're not facing them alone, she said, her eyes fierce. We arrived at the building on a cloudy Saturday, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Linda met us at the entrance, her clipboard in hand. The tenants are home, she said. I'll go in first. I nodded, my heart pounding but my hands steady. Inside, the apartment felt like a memory I'd already started to erase. Emily was on the couch, flipping through a design magazine. Tom leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling on his phone. When they saw me, their eyes widened, confusion flickering across their faces. Mom? Emily said, sitting up. What are you doing here? I didn't answer, just turned to Linda. I'd like to see the storage closet first, I said evenly. I need to check what's in there. Linda nodded, leading the way. Emily stood, her voice sharp. Wait, what's going on? Why the closet? Tom followed, his brow furrowed. I opened the closet door. And there it was, Henry's large sunflower painting, propped against a stack of boxes. Its frame dusty but intact. I ran my fingers over the canvas, the golden petals alive even in the dim light. This comes with me, I said, my voice calm but firm. Emily's face paled. You're the buyer? She stammered. I met her eyes, unflinching. Yes, the building's mine now. Tom blinked, stunned. When did you? Why would you? I cut him off. I came back for my paints a few days ago. I heard you in the kitchen, talking about my money, about selling this painting. You thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. Tom looked away, his jaw tight. You brought me here to see what I could give you, I continued, my voice steady as a finished sketch. Not because you wanted me. I was ready to help, to offer part of my savings for your future. But you didn't see me as family. You saw a way to pay for this place. The room was silent, the weight of my words settling like dust. Linda shifted, ready to move on, but I wasn't done. You have 1 month to move out, per the lease. And this painting? It's not for sale. I turned to leave, Margaret at my side, her hand brushing mine in quiet support. Emily called after me, her voice small. Mom, we didn't mean, but I didn't look back. I stepped into the hallway, the door closing softly behind me. For the first time, I felt solid, like a canvas stretched tight and ready for new colors. Back at Margaret's, I hung the small sunflower painting on the guest room wall, the dried stalk beside it. The large canvas would come later. But for now, I had enough. I'd taken back what mattered, not just the painting, but myself. The day I walked out of Emily's apartment, something settled inside me, like paint drying on a canvas you know you got right. I moved into one of the building's units a month later, after Emily and Tom vacated. The space was bare, its walls echoing with their absence. But I saw potential in the emptiness. I hired a crew to repaint, soft cream instead of stark gray, and hung cotton curtains that let the light in gentle waves. The large sunflower painting took its place above the living room table, its golden petals glowing like they'd been waiting for this moment. The smaller one stayed in my bedroom, a quiet companion. I didn't bring the dried sunflower stalk, it had crumbled too much. Instead, I planted new sunflower seeds in a pot by the window, their green tips already pushing through the soil. I turned the second bedroom into a studio. Shelves lined with paints and brushes. A table scarred from years of creation. The first thing I painted was a small canvas, just a single sunflower against a stormy sky. Its face tilted upward. It wasn't Henry's style, bold and sweeping. It was mine, steady and searching. I hung it by the door. A reminder that I was starting over. Not as a mother or widow, but as Clara, whole on my own. Margaret pushed me to join her community art classes full-time. "You're wasting talent sitting alone," she said, half teasing, half serious. I started teaching weekly, guiding hands that trembled with age or nerves, showing them how to trust their strokes. The group grew, retirees, single parents, even a few teenagers with shy smiles. One woman, her hair streaked with silver, brought me a sketch she'd made of her late husband. "You helped me remember him," she said, her voice thick. I hugged her, my eyes stinging. These strangers, with their smudged fingers and stories, became my family in a way I hadn't expected. They saw me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. Lily's first letter came a month after I settled in. It was a folded piece of construction paper, covered in crayon swirls and a wobbly sunflower. Inside, in her uneven scrawl, she wrote, "I'm sorry I was mean. Grandma, I miss painting with you." I held it for a long time, tracing the lines she'd drawn. I didn't write back right away, not because I was angry, but because I needed time to let the hurt breathe. Instead, I taped the drawing to my studio wall, next to my own sunflower painting. It felt like a seed, small but alive. Emily reached out a few weeks later, her email short but careful. "Mom, can we talk? I know I messed up. Lily keeps asking for you." I agreed to meet her at a small cafe near my building, its windows lined with potted herbs. She looked tired, her sharp edges softened by something I couldn't name. "I didn't realize how much we hurt you," she said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "The rent thing, the painting, it was wrong. I got caught up in our plans, in what we needed." I listened, my hands folded around my tea. "You didn't just hurt me," I said quietly. "You made me feel like I was nothing unless I was useful." She nodded, her eyes down. "I want to fix it. Mom, for Lily, for us." I leaned back, my voice steady. "Fixing means respect, Emily, not just words. You want me in your life? Show me I'm more than a check or a painting you can sell." She didn't argue, just looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. We didn't hug, but when we parted, she said, "I'll try." I believed she meant it, but I wasn't waiting for her to prove it. I'd spent too long waiting. Back home, I taught my classes, tended my sunflowers, and painted late into the night. Margaret's gallery hosted a small show for our group, and I hung my stormy sunflower next to Lily's crayon drawing. People stopped to look, their whispers warm with praise. One evening, as I locked up the studio, I found a package at my door, a tiny canvas from Lily, painted with 2 sunflowers, one big, one small. A note read, "For Grandma, I love you." I smiled, not forgiveness yet, but something softer, like a sketch taking shape. I sat at my table, the large sunflower painting watching over me, and started a new canvas. This one was different, sunflowers in a field, their faces turned every which way, free and unafraid. When it was done, I hung it in the hallway, right by the door. On a whim, I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote in careful letters, "Clara's home. Welcome." I taped it to the wall, not for anyone else, but for me. It was my declaration, my own splash of color. Outside, the sunflowers in their pot swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the light. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing someone else's sun. I was standing in my own.